Good evening. Welcome. I'm Anne McLean from the library's music division. We're really delighted tonight to be presenting the Isidore String Quartet, violinist Phoenix Avalon and Adrian Steele, violist Devin Moore, and cellist Joshua McClendon. We're so pleased that they're playing our Stradivari instruments tonight for the library's annual Stradivari Memorial Concerts, along with violinist Misha Amory and cellist Nina Lee. So please give me another round of applause for these lovely musicians. You all are really in the forefront now of string quartets worldwide. I mean, they're performing at Carnegie in a few days, and then later in the Paris Philharmonie. It's just been a super quick trajectory, really, for you since the Banff 2022 competition, which they walked away with, for being a remarkably mature ensemble, great sound, beautiful phrasing, and intense musicality, and they've already had the Avery Fisher Career Grant. So I was going to say that for us, it's almost like a little bit of a homecoming or a family gathering because you worked with the Juilliard so closely. And for many people in our audience tonight, they knew the Juilliard and heard them here for years and years. So I'd love to have you talk about those ties and your studies with Sam Rhodes and Joel Krosnick, and also about the very interesting program that you've created for tonight. But first, tell us how you decided to form the quartet and how you came to the name Isidore.
Yeah, so we were all students in New York at the same time, and we'd actually met kind of at these various summer festivals before we started studying in New York together. I met Devin and Josh at the Aspen Music Festival in 2018, and Josh and Phoenix met, I think, at the Meadowmount School in 2016. Am I getting that right? And one of the great things about being at Juilliard and being in New York is just there's so many musicians to play with, and that's something that we took advantage of. And so there were these kind of reading parties where, a lot of people would get together and read music just for fun together after hours in like a dance studio at Juilliard or something. And I think in that process, you learn kind of the joy that chamber music can bring. And also you get to meet a bunch of incredible people. And that also happens at summer festivals. And I know Josh and Devin played together at the Aspen Festival and more than a few groups together. So when we were all back in New York together, we asked Devin to come down from the Manhattan School where he was studying. And then he eventually transferred, and then we started playing together. So yeah, it was kind of these chance encounters that all led us here.
And the name you mentioned in your notes is because of a gentleman that we also knew here, Isidore Cohen. Of course, we knew him after his period with the Juilliard, but when he was at the Beaux-Arts, they were in residence here for a long time. I noticed that in your web pages, quite a few of you talk about being incredibly keen to become string quartet players. And Joshua, I think it said you played your first string quartet around 9 or so, and that you pretty much from the start knew that that was a medium I enjoyed more than anything else, but it was a crazy path to get into. And you've mentioned playing on weekends. So this is it's fascinating to hear your passion for this, even as very young children, pardon the word, children. But I wanted to tell this funny story that I was talking one evening at a dinner with a very pleasant gentleman, Mr. Hardy, who said that I should definitely look into the Isidore Quartet, and that if I didn't know about them, I would soon. And I said, okay, I'll certainly look into them, tell me their name. And when he said the Isidore, I said, wow, I'm already presenting them. So I enjoyed meeting your grandfather and your grandmother. And I learned a little bit from his grandparents about some of the factors that influenced their remarkable lyricism. Really a strong sense of the vocal line, beautiful phrasing, and so on. And I just wanted to ask you to talk just for a moment about your background and how the training from your grandmother being a voice teacher and your mother being an Alexander technique person and Feldenkrais. This is such an unusual thing, but just for a bit of a moment, tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, my brother and I are both musicians. He's an oboist who also went to Juilliard. And yeah, my mother is an Alexander teacher. My other mom is a visual artist. So creative family, but not always music related, but very creative. My grandmother is also a singer. So she would come actually around Christmas pretty much every year and kind of give my brother and I lessons on our instruments and teach us more about the vocal aspects of playing. But with the Alexander technique, my mom, Robin Avalon, has been a great supporter of the quartet and has worked with us with Alexander technique and coached us and kind of come in when we desperately needed to avoid injuries as we travel so much. So it's been a real privilege to be able to have something that close to us, be able to really work with us deeply in that way.
It's so unusual, we often talk about the master teachers that people work with, but this is quite unusual to get into the physicality. Let's talk about the program that you've chosen, Brahms, The Admirer. And Devin, your notes are very interesting throughout putting the program together and how the relationship of the three Bs, and I understand that actually Brahms was the first person to acknowledge, to come up with that rubric, the three Bs. And we'll hear two Opus 18s, the Brahms Sextet, which you can see in our foyer tonight, and the Beethoven Opus 18, number 6. But please tell us how you conceptualize the program.
Yeah, this program really got to let me geek out about my favorite composer, which is Brahms. When we were putting together programs for this season, we knew that we wanted to play Brahms's third string quartet as well, and we were looking at different Beethovens and things like that, and people often focus on the love triangle between the Schumanns and Brahms, which is, really interesting. But I was always fascinated by this triangle between Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. I refer to Brahms sort of as like an innovative traditionalist. He loves to take the old and make it new, which is our quartet's motto. It was the motto of the JSQ. And when I get asked who my favorite composer is, it's always Brahms, and I get like gasps, like, what about Beethoven? What about Bach or Haydn? And I always find myself, there are elements of Bach and Beethoven so deeply woven into the DNA of Brahms's music. And so this program is structured in a way that uses Brahms's ideologies both as a composer and as a thinker to craft this program in a way that takes something old and makes it new. So the first section is structured as a traditional Tridentine Mass. And so we're playing various vocal arrangements of Brahms that a lot of people probably haven't heard, as well as some Bach chorales and an excerpt from the B minor Mass. And those pieces are interwoven between the Mass Ordinary or the Gregorian chant that we'll be also singing or playing. We're not actually singing. You have to pay extra for that, yeah. But so this structure that people are unbelievably familiar with provides a foundation to create a comparison between Brahms and Bach. It's an interesting way to take something that is familiar and allows you to see it in a new way. And similarly, the string writing of string quartets and sextets of Brahms are so heavily influenced by Beethoven. And 18/6 in particular is this effervescent, youthful work with elements of what we will see in Beethoven's very deeply melancholic and emotionally invested middle and late quartets. And that's very similar with the Opus 18, the sextet as well. It's a much more expanded work. It's in the romantic harmonic language, but there's so many elements of classical form, of counterpoint, that you could see that Brahms was an intense studier and lover of Bach and Beethoven. And so this program really tracks his, admiration, Brahms the admirer, there we go, but his admiration for these two composers in ways that you would and wouldn't expect.
I was thinking, as you say, I know Brahms made an intense study of counterpoint later in his life, which is unusual. And he wrote about this back and forth with friends and really, was focused on this in his work. And for the Bach B minor Mass, I saw a quote from a letter. I was looking around last night on these, said, "You have never had such an impression of grandeur and nobility, nor would one credit human creation with the capacity to be so exalted and deeply moving. The performance was an immense joy in every regard that he had heard just before that." So I was curious too about not only the Bach connections, but how did you choose the particular songs from the Des Knaben Wunderhorn?
Um, we started crafting this program probably a year and a half ago, I would say, and we spent a lot of time on trains, planes, and automobiles. So I just went on like a huge listening journey. And at first, I really wanted to just connect personally to the music. And there's incredible recordings by John Elliott Gardner of the Brahms symphonies that he pairs with works by Monteverdi and unknown sketches of Brahms, etc. And I was just taken aback by how it made the symphonies that we all know so well so much more vivid when I was experiencing these works that I didn't know. And so that I took a lot of inspiration from that. I was trying to find key relationships and then also putting together the structure of the mass as well. There are some elements that need to be put in place in terms of, the demeanor of each of these particular pieces. And so it was a lot of trial and error trying to get the right flow and experimenting with exactly how we were going to evoke the sense of vocal works with just our instruments. And so it was a few different elements combined, but I think we read Bach every day, and we have since we started working as a string quartet. We will spend 15 to 30 minutes on Bach chorales or Monteverdi madrigals, etc., and using it as a tool. Or also, if we're going absolutely crazy, it's a way to bring us back down to earth for a little bit. So it's also part of our DNA as well. So we when I got my first draft, it wasn't that great. We sat down and read it, and I got so much of their feedback, and so it really was like a collaborative effort to bring this program to life.
It's very interesting. Had you done that before? Developed a program amongst the four of you?
Not like this. This was the first one that really has our hands in there, but we kind of program, I would say, like a year and a half, sometimes thinking about programs 2 or 3 years in advance, so we can really plan things out.
I was thinking when you were talking about playing Bach in the chorales, I was remembering that Jörg Kurtag, the composer, plays every morning on the piano chorales just for himself. So let's see. But in terms of the Brahms that we'll hear tonight, we have a lot of rich manuscript fodder for you to look at in their glass cases and so on. We're very heavy on Brahms. We have one of the world's largest collections of Brahms. The same remarkable donor who gave the Strads that they'll be playing also donated many composers' manuscripts, including the sextet. And I was reading that when he wrote it at 27, really just a year or two older than where you all are, he had written a lot of piano works and the Opus 8 piano trio, but only just that and a few unpublished string quartets. So this was really like a preparation or a proving ground for the later quartets. So I was curious to hear you talk about particularly the variation set, which is so fascinating and so beautiful and offers so many moments to shine, so many angles and reiterations and connections between the parts and so on, and just anything about how that is fun for you and it offers opportunities.
Well, I feel like any sort of set of variations is always particularly fun to do as a group. Like you're saying, there are all these different characters and textures, and it feels like you go from moments of just deep intimacy, there are volatile moments, there are stormy moments. It's sort of Brahms pulls all the emotional stops throughout this and sort of showcases each of the instruments at their best and with each of their strengths. And I think for us as a group, it's a chance for us to just dive really deep into our individual personalities. And oftentimes we're thinking so much about what we're doing as an ensemble, and a movement like this really gives us that opportunity to step outside of that and to really sort of stay in touch with just who we are as individuals. And for me, on a personal note, it's so nice to hear the rest of my colleagues sort of really do their thing in that way and sort of reconnect with them so personally.
And if you mess up, you get another chance, you know? Every variation gets a repeat. We call that the redemption round. Yeah.
You know, maybe in our annotation tonight it says the annotator says this variation set features pensive and mysterious music with coiled energy just below the surface. I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's a great description. Thinking about the ways to shine that this music provides particularly, I wanted to ask you, what do you think our instruments offer an artist? We often talk with instruments about the challenges of playing the strads, but I wondered what particular aspect of playing them there is that you felt had helped your performance, something enabling you to express things you might not have on other instruments.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is just kind of the breadth of possibility. The instrument will kind of tell you what it wants to do sometimes, and I think that's really refreshing as an artist. And you know, sometimes you'll be playing on like high up on the D string, and there's a note that just sounds particularly wonderful in a passage, and you kind of reconsider what role that note has in the passage. And I think that there are so many little moments that I've had over the past 2 days where I'm playing something that I've played, you know, for hours in my life, and I hear something new, and I'm using these different points of contact, and sometimes things will just pop out of me out of nowhere, and it's like, ooh, I can do this. And it's because we play on our instruments for hours every day, so when we get something that is so special, that is so new, there's just like these infinite possibilities that we can manufacture colors with.
Like similarly, this cello in particular is absolutely limitless up until it feels like, it's like it actually in this hand it doesn't tell you how it wants to be played at all. It's just that whatever you put into it, seemingly it will give you. So there are many moments where I might hear something a certain way, and I try it in the hands, and in real time, I'm very surprised it's actually happening, and positively. And it's just been a joy to, like you said, explore so many possibilities.
You know, we are incredibly grateful to Ken Slowick from the Smithsonian. He's the curator of instruments there, and he made this possible, and it was quite difficult to arrange all the things that you can imagine to bring a valuable and unique instrument like this to have here with us to have two cellos, two Stradivari cellos that have not been cut down. Neither of the two cellos have ever been cut down to a modern size, and they're a few centimeters larger, but the sound is way larger, and it's just, as you say, it's a joy to hear. So if you see Ken Slowick, we all have to thank him, because this is all due to him. And we like to think that we're in the business of creating life-changing experiences here at the library, and I think this is kind of one of them for this evening. Back to the manuscript, just for 1 second before I forget about this. We also have the four-hand version of this sextet and a solo piano version that we don't own this one, but he published one that he created for Clara Schumann, of which I didn't know. So in terms of the contemporary music, one of the things I was thinking about was how the Juilliard always had as their ethos the idea that you play older music with the verve and passion of new music, and established music, the other way. And I'm interested in your work with Billy Childs recently, and in general, that's one question, and talk about the new commission that you've just done for Billy Childs. And the other aspect that would be interesting to hear from you about is how, what ethos do you communicate when you work with your students these days? In other words, how do you approach contemporary music? How do you talk to them about it?
To your first question, I mean, we have such a privilege to get a chance to work on this commission with Billy. He's a composer that we've loved and have played his other works over the years. And since we started as a quartet, his second quartet was something we played probably over 100 times. And audiences all over the world fell in love with his language. I mean, he's a 6-time Grammy Award-winning jazz pianist, but he's an incredibly, incredibly thoughtful and skilled classical composer and classical pianist as well. And that apparent juxtaposition, when hearing Billy's music, it just blends so beautifully, and it becomes such a unique voice where both of these styles exist at the same time in his music. And that's something with our particular quartet, is we all come from very different backgrounds, and also we all have very different styles of playing and things that we enjoy doing and things that we like, and there's so much nuance there. And so I think we deeply connected to that with Billy in this fourth quartet of his that he's writing, which we're premiering in February, sort of expands, goes deeply into that. It's titled American Mosaic. And it's a very poignant work that explores a lot of that nuance and explores the differences in America and at large, but also specifically in our quartet, and how we can bring that together in the piece throughout the 3-movement work. So that's been such a joy. And really, this is our first major commission, so we don't want to mess that up either. And I guess someone else can jump into, but in terms of contemporary music, we also have very different desires and tastes in things that we want to do. But I think that hasn't stopped us from approaching anything, really. At the end, if the 4 of us don't like the piece, we're like, well, we don't like this piece, and that's also okay. And I think it's okay to still be able to establish opinions on music, but to, as you said, to approach any new music with the type of established intellectuality and when you sit down with Beethoven, you have a laundry list of things that you have to go through or that you want to go through to explore, and we try to do that with any piece that we're playing. And when we're teaching students, we're still quite young, so the dynamic can be strange at times. I think it's more of a group exploration of things. Because I'm not old enough to tell you what to do. I'm old enough to tell you what I do, and you could try that and see if it works for you. And I think all of us really enjoy teaching in that way, because it helps us compartmentalize our own thoughts and our own philosophies. And it's a trial and error with us as much as it is with the students. Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, I think we've kind of adopted the JSQ's philosophy of treating the old as the new and the new as the old. And I think the core underlying value of that is just approaching everything with curiosity, and kind of treating it as a playground and being curious. Even though you know how a Mozart quartet should go, there's still a curiosity of what else is there in that, and what new spin can I put on it without for the purpose of being new, but just because you're curious about what is there. And similarly with new music, being curious what it might be inspired by, being curious what you might be able to add to it, even though everything's there and very particular. I think just having an underlying foundation of curiosity.
While you were talking, I suddenly had a mental picture of Joel Krosnick, and that was him to a T. He was so involved with every piece of music in a deep way, very, very curious man, and full of the most. He was such an energetic person. You worked with both him and Sam Rhodes, right, at Juilliard? And then now, do you teach, are you graduate teaching students or teaching assistants?
We taught at the Southern Methodist University in Dallas for 2 years as part of the Banff Prize, which was really such a gift to be able to consistently go back to Dallas and work with the same students. And now most of our teaching, since the majority of our work is on the road, most of our teaching happens in master classes, or if we get a chance to work with certain students in cities. But we're not at a school yet. We're manifesting it, though.
So how I went back to your own plans as a quartet. I read that you, as a group, are deeply connected, deeply invested in connecting with youth and elderly populations. I was interested in the elderly populations because you don't really see that so often, and also marginalized communities. And thinking, how would you advise quartet players in the future who are putting together their quartets? Is that something that you think is going to be an integral part of your thinking as you get older and busier?
Absolutely, I think so. Our group actually, some of our first professional engagements after the Banff competition were with Project Music Heals Us in New York, which is Molly Carr's nonprofit that she started. I'm not sure exactly when, but they take musicians into hospices and nursing homes, hospitals, prisons, child performance centers, etc. And they bring live music into spaces where people don't have access to it. And so I think that as a group, it really sort of showed us how important live music is for everyone. And we saw people sort of how they received having live music for the first time in a long time. And I think we can probably all agree that those are some of our most special moments as a group, and it's something that we definitely wish to carry going forward.
And I see that you were involved in a big project with the Interlochen Academy, massive project for young artists or it's still students at the Academy, right? Maybe tell the audience a little bit about that.
Sure, this is coming up in March, actually. So Interlochen is doing a tour to celebrate America's 250th birthday, and they commissioned a cello concerto by Wynton Marsalis. And they're going to be doing a side-by-side tour, and Yo-Yo Ma is going to be touring the concerto. It's being written for him, but he couldn't make one of the dates, so I'm jumping in March. So the piece is actually just finished a few days ago, so
Fantastic.
that's on my list of things to get on when I get home.
And you'll play with the Detroit Symphony, right?
Yes, that's right.
That's a big thing. So let's see. I have one question about your social life. How do you have time to have any fun? It sounds like you're extremely busy. Do you have separate lives and so on?
Yeah, they despawn when we're not playing, and I have no idea who they are or where they are. No, I think it's definitely a challenge, especially we started this when we were all still in school, so we actually left school to start pursuing this touring career. And it can be difficult to find the balance and to find time. The first 3 years were really something, but I think now that there's like a new Banff winner, and we've sort of gone through the trial process of those 3 years, that we've each been able to have so much more clarity about everyone's individual needs, and trying to find the best way to balance that. And saying no is something we weren't very good at, but now we're very, very good at that. And it's an important thing, you know. But yeah, all of us, our friends are also musicians living in New York, doing very similar things. Even if they're not traveling with a quartet, if they're freelancing in an orchestra, you're constantly, trying to schedule hanging out with someone 6 months in advance when you know you're both going to be in the city. So everyone's sort of in the same boat in that way.
My New Year's resolution last year was to go out more, so.
Generation after generation, we see wonderful string quartets here, and it's always interesting to me to know that the vitality is so strong for this tradition. It does not stop. And I was looking at the two biennials this year in Paris and Amsterdam. We met with the woman who's running the Amsterdam biennial recently about a project. And just, you would expect that at some point people would say, well, this is something that is probably past its time, or why do we? No, it keeps going and going. And you on your website, I love the word undaunted. You are undaunted in how you approach your future as musicians and everything to do with the quartet. Maybe one question. How do you envision the future of the genre?
That's a really tough question. Kind of actually to speak about the Biennales, we had the privilege of going to the Amsterdam String Quartet Biennale a year and a half ago. And one of the things that is so amazing when you go to an event like that is that there are, 20 quartets from around the world, and they're all playing quartets, but they're all doing vastly different things. They're programming different pieces, even the pieces that they share in common, like the differences in interpretations, even in just how you can perceive a piece, is so different within those 20 groups. And then you think about all of the quartets in the world and the amount of possibilities that there are there, not only within the existing repertoire, but these quartets are bringing new works and commissioning composers to create new things for the quartet. So there's always things to do, and there are always new things to explore. And I think that's one of the things that we've been most inspired by, is that we have, these colleagues in the quartet world. Of course, Nina and Misha, obviously from the Brentano Quartet, but also some young colleagues that we worked with when we met them at the Banff String Quartet competition or at the Biennale. There's just so much vitality and there's so much warmth from all of the groups, and they're always so willing to talk and to give ideas to us. And I think that kind of boisterousness within the quartet world is something that just will always exist.
I also think with string quartets, in terms of the future of the genre, I think there's no chance it could ever really die out, because I think at its core it's based in community and friendship, and I think that's something that we're always searching for as a species. So I think that chamber music is always going to have very strong foundations, and I think especially as the world in general is more connected and we're constantly knowing everything about everything, having a space to 4 people or 6 people or 8 people sitting down and just playing a quartet is a very special moment. So I think it's a very, very strong future.
I congratulate you on everything that you're doing, really. What you're saying comes across, don't you think? So now we have a chance for you to ask them a few questions before they have to go and warm up. Does anybody have a question?
I was very scared. Yeah. I'm not. I did have like a stress dream about accidentally crushing one of them, so I really hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's I mean, especially for, I don't know, there's only 10 I want to say 10 Stradivarius in the world, and so I've never actually held a Strad. Like, we've some of our friends, we've all like held some Strad violins before. But this is the first time actually holding a Strad viola, and I really didn't want to make it go from 10 to 9. I think that's the fear of dropping it is actually very palpable. So.
How much time did you get to play on the Strads before tonight?
We've been here since Tuesday. We got here Tuesday, so we had a day to sort of like by ourselves, and then we spent yesterday rehearsing. So yeah, about 2 days. Yeah, not a lot of time, but like Adrian was saying earlier, the instrument at times sort of tells you what to do and tells you where to go. So you just have to listen to it.
Can you talk about your time at Meadowmount?
Yeah, Meadowmount was very formative for me. I was there from when I was 11 until I was 15, so I was there for a while. And it's where I met one of my most foundational teachers, Jan Sloman. But I mean, Meadowmount's a great place. It's kind of, they send you there for 7 weeks in the summer, and you essentially get locked in a practice room for 5 hours a day and practice. But it puts in a sense of discipline, and it gives you also a time which, once you go to college, that time disappears to actually practice and actually get to know your instrument and put in the amount of hours that a lot of times it's just necessary to have.
And we actually get to go back, or Adrian and I have never been there, but we get to go this summer for a concert and also a master class. So that'll be a great opportunity for Josh and Phoenix to sort of reconnect to a place that was super formative.
Can I just say, from the area, and your free concerts in the community are just absolutely spectacular. It's just such a joy to have you all up there. And one other question: does your mother teach the Alexander method there?
She does. She's been there for about 15 years now teaching.
Thank you so much.
I'm curious about teaching. When you teach, do you all teach together, or are you teaching your instrument, or are you teaching
For quartets, it kind of depends. Normally, we kind of like to assign kind of one or two people to kind of really lead it, and then you can have kind of everyone out in the audience, so you get multiple points of kind of contact with the group. And I think when you're teaching a quartet, there are so many, there are things that I don't know about playing in a quartet because I do not play cello and I do not play viola. So there are things that I cannot. There are kind of tricks and there are kind of ways of thinking about kind of how sound works within a group that I can't quite address all the time. So it's really helpful to have some help with the other three.
And individually as well. When we were at SMU, we got to work individually with students and teach private lessons. That way, we gave some presentations and also public master classes, also quartet coaching. So it's kind of a wide array of teaching and coaching. Yeah.
So I'm curious, what other quartets do you admire or inspired by?
Definitely the Brentanos. I know it's not just because we're playing with them, I promise. But yeah, I mean, I had the privilege of studying both with Sam Rhodes from the Juilliard String Quartet and with Misha during my master's. And both of those quartets in particular have been like unbelievably formative, not only as actually teaching us, but just listening to them for years. I mean, the Opus 18 quartets from the JSQ, I think in 89 or 90 from here were like some of my first quartets I ever sat down. And I was like, I want to do that like that. And the Brentanos too, as mentors, but also as people. Like they have been a quartet for 30 years and the way they conduct themselves as teachers and players and as individuals is super inspiring. And they still have this like youthful joy and wonder and that curiosity Phoenix was talking about. Yeah, I mean, there's so many, Katora Ben, Belchea, like there's so many incredible quartets, but Brentano and JSQ have really been super formative to us.
I'm really intrigued by the Strat instruments. So I just want to ask, what words would you use to describe what the Strat sounds like versus a non-Strat? I know there are excellent non-Strats, so could you articulate the difference?
It's kind of hard to put into words, but I think a common trait I've noticed in a lot of Strads I've heard is that it has this particular zing, this kind of power and clarity to it. And especially having 6 of them on stage, they kind of feed off of each other. In one of our first rehearsal, we started the second movement of the Brahms Sextet, and the first chorus, I was like, wow, that's something. But I mean, there's so much depth, there's so much possibilities. Yeah, and just like, they're like race cars, yeah.
It's somewhat unapologetic, we were talking about when something wasn't working, the instinct is to like, kind of lean in and like make it work. And anytime any of us did that, the instrument just continued to not work. And so it sort of forces you to really create a collaboration between you and the instrument as well. You have to listen, you have to put it in and then allow it to work. And so you don't really have the privilege to do that with some other instruments. Some other instruments sound beautiful, but you really have to craft it and sort of bring it where it's going constantly and shape it. But the Strat, it's like you really have to find that balance of putting enough energy into the instrument and then allowing it to, like Phoenix said, have this zing and this power. Yeah, it's a completely different feeling, like playing it, and the longevity of playing, and like I'm able to play a lot longer actually and not have back pain because the sound just like comes out of it. Yeah. We do have our own bows, yes, but there are really nice bows in there. And maybe we could convince them to let us try them for a few minutes.
Great. Anyone else? Maybe in the very back, there's someone?
What instruments are you not playing? There's one.
Oh yeah, there's one other violin, right? Which
I think there are two. There's the Chrysler Del Jesu, and then there's the Betz Strat that I think are in the case right now. I'm not sure. Yes, there are 2 Strats in there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, one of them is
One's
Del
a Del
Jesu.
Jesu.
Sorry. Yeah, the Del Jesu was donated by Chrysler to the government, or to the Library of Congress, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot.
Yeah, well, I think this has been a fascinating chat here, and we are grateful to you for taking the time. Thank you so much.